This conference will now be recorded.
Mary, are you okay with starting now, or do you want to wait a few more minutes?
I'm good with whatever you guys would like to do. I just shared with Mark, we just finished our program for Mid-Michigan ARMA. I just got off, I was doing on the panel for that one on a similar subject. So I'm good. You're my last have to for the day. So whatever works for all of you.
Okay. Yep. Well, okay, so let's go ahead and get started. People may just be running late with meetings going on with virtual meetings and Teams and Zoom and all that. The meetings are tending to go over. So let's go ahead and we have a good number of people on the line. So let's go ahead and get started. So I want to thank everyone again for showing up for our monthly meeting. My name is Janice Redmond, and I'm president of the Columbus, Ohio ARMA chapter. And as you know, we've been doing virtual meetings, which seem to turn out pretty good. We haven't received any feedback or complaints. And today's meeting will be interesting. I will have our vice president introduce our speaker, but I love the title of this, Building a Remote Worker Strategy. And you know, we're all doing this, and you know, like I said earlier, once I figure all this out, we'll be back at work next June or whatever. We won't have to use this as much. But I'm going to turn the mic over to Joy, and so we can get going. And Joy Nelson, she will introduce our speaker.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Kind of speaking to what we've talked about, how well virtual meetings are going, Greater Columbus chapter has expanded out. So I went looking for potential topics, knowing this topic was a hot one for speakers. And Mary Martin is the ECM event manager for Applied Imaging. She has done a very similar presentation. That's how I found out about it for Mid-Michigan. And figured I'd bring her in because this is a very relevant topic, and I don't know about everyone else's orgs, but everyone's looking at what are we going to do? Are we going to bring everyone back in? Are we going to keep doing remote? You know, where are we going? She's been doing a lot of different. She started as a micrographics specialist, and now she's moved into an ECM specialist, and manages and teaches a portion of all the ECM events offered by Applied Imaging. She has been or is actually part of the Mid-Michigan board. I am impressed, Mari, this 22 years on the board. That is very, very wonderful of you to volunteer your time for that long. And with that, I will turn it over to Mary.
Thank you. And 2 stints as president, it's a fun job. Let me share my screen. And let me know if you have a hard time hearing me or seeing. Let me go to the slideshow here and make sure we're working. There we go. Can everybody see that? Are we good?
You're coming through, and your sound is good too.
Good. We just did a test run. We just finished a program, as I mentioned, to Mark at noon today on a similar subject with a panel this time that I was on. So here's, as we move forward, here's what we're going to be talking about today, the remote workforce. It started back last spring, and it has morphed and changed as we worked through all of these months, and we're going to see where they are today and what the challenges are that they're facing. What are those problems that are out there, and what are the solutions? What do they look like? What tools are available to you to help connect your workforce? You have to worry about security, accessing data from anywhere out there. How do you optimize the business risks that are out, or business risks that are out there, business process, I should say, and mitigate the risk, as well as take a look at collaboration and making sure your employees are happy and empowered in what they're doing. I'll give you a game plan on where to start, and then we'll have time for questions and answers afterwards. So make notes and throw those into the chat as we go. We all know that when we hit COVID-19, everything went into fast forward back last spring, and everybody started that wide spread scramble to go remote with their working. Interestingly enough, Gartner, which is an independent study group, probably you're all very familiar with out there, they track everything from organizations to technology and everything in between. They did a survey. They talked to 127 company leaders to ask them, is this going to continue? they said in response, 82% of the respondents intended to continue that remote working once this is done. Now, it might be a combination of things, mostly remote, but they're going to have what's called a hybrid workforce. And I work with 3 different states, and I can tell you I'm seeing a real creative way of doing this out there. What that means is, for example, in our company, one week you're in the office working, the next week you are home, and that group that was home the week you were working in the office comes into the office. I've also seen it from the angle of Monday and Wednesday, this group is in the office, and Tuesday and Thursday, another group comes in. So there's a lot of creativity going on, but I think you're going to find as we move forward, they've discovered, organizations have, that they can cut a lot of cost for floor space and other things by moving towards more of a hybrid and having more people working at home. So let's take a look at these 7 different challenges, and I'll give you solutions. There's hope coming here along the way. We're going to take a look at worker productivity, a way to handle time management if you're at home. Is there a question of working too much? Can you work too much? Distractions, bad health habits, communication, of course, that big one that we all deal with, that scattered information, of course, technology as you work through there. I'm going to jump back to Gardner again, because you know, one of the concerns why people weren't working at home to start with was, are they productive? Are they working as hard at home as they would in the office unsupervised? I can tell you this from personal experience, I work harder at home than I did in the office. I don't have the interruptions. I don't do some things that to get up and walk around and so forth that you would have done in an office. Gardner did a study again, and only 13% of the business leaders really were concerned about productivity. I found this fascinating. 61% said, you know, we changed the way we do things. We've got more frequent check-ins with our managers and employees, and I'll talk more about that as we get into that a little further. And 29% said they're not concerned. We trust them. They're going to be productive out there. But time management, if you're working at home, you need to be self-motivated. That's half the battle, is making sure that you're doing what you need to do to get the work done. I love Mark Twain. He's one of my favorite authors, and he once said, if you've got something you have to do that you hate to do it, eat that live frog first thing in the morning. I know you probably just had lunch, and I'm sorry. But basically what he's saying is get a list together. I work from a list. Every day I know what I'm going to be tackling for the day. I may have started it the day before, but at the top of that list is my one thing that I don't want to do the most. Get it done first. Eat that live frog, and then the rest of your day will go easily as you start moving through that. The other thing, working too much. I found this early on back in last March. I'll tell you what, you don't take a lunch break. You bring your lunch back to your desk. You don't take a break. You think of something in the evening. You run back into the office. You hear the phone, your business phone, cell phone ringing. You go answer it. You can work too much, folks. So what you need to think about is rewarding yourself and taking breaks. My niece taught me this. She works for a major insurance company here in the nation, and she literally took her phone and set the alarm for 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And she got up, she's in management, and she would take a walk, leave her laptop behind, go outside if it was nice, do something. Get on the treadmill for a few minutes to get away from work and clear her brain, and take a lunch hour, get away from the desk. Otherwise, you're going to burn out if you don't take care of yourself while you're working at home. That's critical. And I know we've all got distractions. Kids working at home, pets, delivery people. Here in Michigan, most of our people have now been sent home again if they weren't originally, and the schools are all having kids at home. So what do you do with those distractions? Because it's a problem if you're trying to work. What you need to do really is sit down with your family or whoever you happen to live with and talk about when is the proper time to interrupt. What's the criteria? You know, I worked with a woman years ago. I loved how she did this. She had a wooden spoon. She hung it on the door of her office. If that spoon was hanging on the door, even if the door was cracked a bit, she would tell her family there is only one reason you can interrupt me, because I'm going to be on a conference call or a meeting, and only one reason that you can interrupt me, and you better be bleeding. If you're not bleeding, it'll wait. And she used that to kind of communicate to her family what's a good interruption and so forth. So take a look at that. Another good friend of mine lives in the Cleveland area. He was just telling me last night that he goes over 5 days a week and takes care of his 9-month-old grandson so the father can work in a closed door there in the house. So maybe you need to bring in somebody like that to help you avoid some of those distractions. I want to ask how many put on the COVID-15 while you were home since March, off and on, along the way, but it's out there. Take a look at your health habits. One of two things happened during this last 8 months. One was people ate too much, or the other hand, they ate better than they did when they were in the office. I happen to be in that last group. I found that I wasn't running out to lunch with people or eating high calorie things, so I was taking much better care of myself as well. But think about how much rest you're getting. You know, if you don't have that drive time, it's real good. It's really easy to say, I'm going to sleep into this time. I don't need to be at my desk until 8. Make sure you've got a routine and you keep to it. It will help you in a lot of ways, especially if you're at the desk every day at the same time and quitting about the same time every day. That helps immeasurably. Now, communication, this one has been a fun one to watch come down during the course of the last number of months. You need to establish a cadence for communication. That is critical. You know, when we're not seeing people face to face and we can read their expressions on their face, you may send something in an email and you meant it to be pleasant and just a comment on something where the person receiving it reads it as a critique and they're upset. If you're on the receiving end, respond back and say, did I read that correctly? Make sure you communicate to clarify. And I can tell you what people are doing, and this is one of the things we do. I have a weekly one-on-one meeting with my manager every week. It's at Wednesday at 9:30, and it's not somebody saying, what have you done all week? He doesn't care. What it is I go into this actually with another list. I collect things as I go through the week that I want to talk about, highlight that have gone well, maybe some things that didn't, ask questions, whatever it might be, those things that can wait until you have that conversation. And on the other hand, he has a piece of paper as well where he has written or electronically tracked what he wants to talk to me about. The other thing that we do is a weekly action review meeting. Every Monday morning at 9 o'clock, the technology team, the consultants all get together. And the first 5 minutes are fun because I'll tell you why, you're building camaraderie. Camaraderie in just hearing about what went on last week and talking about the football games. About the first 5 minutes is all dedicated to that along the way. And then we go into the gist of the meeting. You know, what's happening out there, what projects are moving, what information each team might need, what's coming up we need to be aware of. It's a good time during those weekly action review meetings to have an idea of what's happening out there in the world and keep the group communicating. Now, some organizations are using end-of-day check-ins where they ask their team members to prepare a list that's completed and sent every day. Now, if you have something like Salesforce or other software out there where you're tracking customer relation information, that information is already in there. Our organization made it very clear early on that they were watching what was going into the Salesforce database, how many emails were being sent out of in there, how many emails were stored, tasks, notes put in, phone calls made, all of that. So at any given time, a management person could take a look and say, wow, I see that this person has been doing quite a lot. In fact, they even went so far as to post the top achievers, you know, for the month, if you will, for the most phone calls and whatever. But think about what's out there. And I don't know if you've heard this, but there's even software out there that can track the number of keystrokes on your employee's computer. So if you want to make sure they're really working, there's this hidden spyware, if you will, for lack of a better name, that can track if they're actually working or not. Not that something I'd recommend, but it is out there, by the way. Information was scattered all over the place when this thing started. I knew one person who went into the office 3 times in one day to gather paper. You know, when we hit remote, the one thing that didn't share very well was paper. And it could be behind locked doors in an office, stacked on desk. It could be all over the place. The other information that we found that was a problem was that electronic information stored on workstations. You know, I read a statistic out there recently that if you checked, most people have most of the information on their personal workstation stored in their email system somewhere in folders. Places that you or the other members of the staff probably don't have access to. or maybe a drive on that workstation that only that person has access to. Now that became a problem when you started sending people home, because if that person was out sick or they were on furloughed, well, how do you get to that information? What do you do? The other interesting thing that happened was tracking required approvals for remote workers. I'll give you an example. I worked with a government agency early on. This is how they paid their invoices. An invoice would come into the office. If it was electronic, they would print it out. If it was hard copy in the mail, they would take it out and walk over to a bank of mailboxes built on the side of the wall. Each mailbox had a staff member's name underneath it. They would then put the hard copy invoice into that mailbox, and they would wait for the person to come in to check their mail to approve or reject the invoice. Then they would walk back to accounts payable to have it paid. Now, that process was already fraught with problems before the shutdown came. When the shutdown happened, they were scrambling. Fortunately, in their case, they had software already in place they were using for more of a store and retrieve solution. So they just had to adjust it a bit, add a workflow in there so they could start moving things along electronically. And I'll talk a lot about that as we move forward here in a little bit. The other fun thing out there was paper forms. I'll tell you another interesting conversation. I had a school district call me and they said, "Do you have a scanner that will kill viruses?" No. In 23 years, I've not heard of a scanner that kills viruses. Tell me what you're doing. They were deploying 800 Chrome books to the students in the field, and one of the parents or the guardians to sign the form saying that they had received the book. But the paper was coming back and they were afraid of a virus being on it. Now, we know a lot more about COVID right now than we knew back then. I then went on to say, have you thought about making it electronic? You know, you could do a fillable PDF. If you've got a software that can create a form, then a link can be put out on the website for people to click into. You could send it in an email. There's a lot of ways you could run at this, and we help them get through that. But the other thing with that information being scattered is you have to think about teammates that are out there who've been furloughed or who are out sick. COVID is taking a major hit in some of our companies now, and unfortunately the person may not be sick, but they were exposed, so now they're quarantined and they're not working. So we're losing large chunks of people as a result of this scattered information. Technology was one of the things everybody was trying to deal with as we move forward. This was put out by Microsoft, and I love the comment. Do you know, in 2 months, we accomplished 2 years worth of digital transformation. Talk about having to fast run into getting everything up and getting everybody moving. They figured we did it all in about 2 months when this thing got started. Businesses were scrambling. They were sending people home. They were trying to figure out how to make them so they were remote enabled overnight almost. And then how do you allow them to collaborate? What do you do with that work in process? And better yet, what about workflow? Productivity, all of that. So what was happening was they had to reevaluate what was going on in their organizations, where they could make the changes, what had to be altered, maybe even totally redesigned as they started to move forward. The other thing that got to be really interesting was virtual private networks. My Nisha heard me talk about that organization had a VPN, a virtual private network that only they had access to. On the Thursday night before the shutdown, the entire company was told to go home at 7 o'clock at night. They were to log into the VPN to see if the VPN or that virtual private network could handle the load. And that was true of a lot of companies. Those were wonderful. They're wonderful situations, but they're not designed to handle the size of the remote workforce that we have out there at this point in time. And so the other part of it was, at the same time, can it handle it? But more importantly, what do we do to take the pressure off that network if we can? So as you start to work remotely, you need to embrace technology. And I'm talking about hardware, but I'm also talking about apps and software and things like that. And one of the things I'm going to say with the VPN, I know our company did, they sent out written instructions on, hey, if you're going home and you've never used the VPN or the virtual network before, here's instructions on how to get in there, how to use it, and how to test it. Be sure you do that before you go home. Make sure you've got it working before you get home so you don't get into trouble when you get there. So there's another tip for you as well that we did along that way. Security is an issue when you've got people working at home. How do you keep track of security? You know, it's interesting, that virtual private network we thought was a dime technology. Not anymore. With COVID-19, that's become the way that people are now working. There's been some changes in that, and I'll share those as we go as well. But the other thing you need to take a look at is if your office hadn't issued you a laptop or a device that you could take home to work on, you may be using your own home PC. What's the risk to your network and bringing those unknown devices in? Do you have problems with viruses that may be transmitted in? Other ways of coming into your network you don't want to have issues with. So you do need to evaluate those risks as well of people using their own devices at home. The other thing you need to do is to develop a usable remote worker policy. I can tell you our organization put out a 29-page booklet. It was electronic. You could print it if you wanted to. But it covered everything that you needed to know about our new work environment remotely. If you were a hybrid worker and staying in the office, here's the precautions that were in place. Only so many people in the cafeteria at one time or the lunchroom. Even opened up the larger meeting room at noon to help people spread out. We have people, we're considered an essential business, so we still had people out in the field. They got them PPE equipment. They even went so far as dispatch, if you called for an assistance, we'd say, do you have somebody with COVID in your office? We need to know before we send somebody. So that person was aware of what they were walking into. Make sure that you have it written down or in some kind of a policy everybody is aware of how things are going to be handled. Even if they come down with COVID, what are the procedures for that? The other thing you need to make sure you put in there is information governance requirements. How are you going to handle things now they're working remotely? Retention, all of those other things. And you know, it's human nature. We like to print things out. And what happens if they do that at home? And it's something with vital information about your organization. You don't want them throwing that in a trash can with a social number on it or something else. And better yet, going to recycling or to the trash can. What do you do with that? Have a policy. You need to know there are document destruction services out there that will give you a bag. You can either have it dropped off at the home or you can pick it up in an office. That's a secure bag to put those documents in for destruction and then set a time for them to pick them up at your home or wherever you drop it off. And we just finished a meeting at Mid-Michigan and somebody said this is even available at some of the Staples home office kind of places out there. So if you have just small amounts, you don't even need to get a company who specializes in it. You can take them into those places and they'll take care of it for you and give you a certificate of destruction as well to make sure that you've done the right thing in protecting your information. So let's talk about how do we fix all this? What do we do about connecting that workforce? How do you secure your data and mitigate the risk and make the best use of your business process, as well as collaboration and, of course, employees? What do you do about making sure they're happy and empowered and ready to go? You know, the cloud was always big before this all started. It has really kicked up, and I'll share a statistic with you down the way here a little bit. But the advantage with cloud storage is your files are all stored securely in one place. You can control access to who gets into them. For example, you better have the login and the password to get past the front door to even get into the cloud to look at information that's stored there. You can control what they get to do. If you're in management, you get to view these things. You have delete rights, but if you are a staff worker, maybe you only have view capabilities. You can really make that granular if you want to. But the most important thing is your team members can connect and you're all sharing the same information in one unified, digitized process. It's all in one place and it makes it so much easier. Now I know security, the cloud's been around a long time and security has always been a question. I would venture, and I'd put a bet on it, that probably cloud security is better than your own server in your office somewhere, because what they're doing now is they're encrypting information on the way to the cloud. They're encrypting information while it's stored in the cloud. And at the same time, they're keeping data separation. Your information is only in your own information silo. It's not mixed with anybody else's information. So you don't have to worry about that. The other thing you need to ask if you're looking at a cloud solution, or better yet, if you have one, ask, do you have my data replicated? Now, what I mean by that is, for example, they might have a server farm out in the East Coast somewhere in Boston, And out in the Midwest, in Iowa, Nebraska, somewhere out there is another server farm, and the information is shared between those two server farms. So if there is a power outage on the East Coast and that Boston location goes down, your information is still accessible from that place in Iowa or Nebraska. So ask questions on that. That way you're always up and running when you're moving forward. The most important thing the cloud did was to automate those common business practices. You know, that manual data entry, that moving of documents, paper especially, and archiving it into folders and all of that just does not work in a remote world. So that's where the cloud shines. You can focus on what drives innovation and profit. Now, I've given you a couple examples here. I've seen this. Invoice approval is one of them. It's big. FOIA requests if you're in government. Employee onboarding is another huge area that a lot of this is taken over and information is being stored that way. Let's talk about the web client. You heard me say that we were checking our VPN, but most virtual private networks were not designed for the heavy usage that was going to come from being remote. What most people did was went to a web client. That means you don't need to install a special program on your workstation. You don't need a virtual private network of any kind. All you need is a web browser. It could be Chrome, it could be Internet Explorer, it could be whatever. But the key is most softwares work with a variety of browsers, and all you need is an access to that browser or the internet, and you're in and working. Now, again, the web client has a password and a login at the front door. You can't supply that, you don't get in. But the other advantage is that you can work from anywhere with that. And mobile devices have really picked up usage when it comes to working remotely. It's a new standard, and we'll talk more about that. But first, let me show you what a web client might look like. Most softwares are the same. This just happens to be one that I thought you might find interesting to give you an idea of how much you can do while you're in a web client. It's like your own personal little work area, if you will. On the left side is your document tray over there where you see that web client window. It's like the tray you might have on your desk or a basket where people drop work. That's where things drop in and they stay there until you do something with them. The circle that just flew up are the electronic file cabinets. Now, this is an imaginary company called Peters Engineering. They make roller coasters. And Peggy works in accounting, so she is only going to see those electronic file cabinets or folders related to accounting, and she happens to take care of FOIA as well, Freedom of Information Act, for those of you not familiar with that, when you want information from a government agency about something. So she handles all of that as well. Now, if she wants to bring things into her basket, she can import them by clicking that button and bringing them in from anything stored out there. She could hit scan and have a scanner attached to bring information into this document tray. It'll drop it right in. She could also have a watched folder that she's just dropping things, dragging and dropping. The folder's being watched, and when something appears there, boom, it drops it into the basket. And it can automatically index it or pull information to fill in the fields of ways you can find it later, as well as automatically store it or import it in. Now, I have a question for you, and you can all think about this. Anybody in your office ever print something out just to scan it back in again? I'm going to venture to say a lot of you are nodding your heads out there. This is where an electronic printer and a web client or a cloud solution comes in handy. Instead of printing it out, you hit print, and rather than picking a copier or a HP or Lexmark or something sitting in the office, you hit the electronic printer and it stores a copy electronically either in the basket, or it can automatically pull those index pieces of information and store it automatically for you in the software. Has a lot of flexibility. Here's what else this web client could do for you, and this is true of a lot of the software that's out there. You have annotations. If you need to share information but it's got a social security number on it, maybe you need to redact it, you need to hide it, you need to put text on there, you need to highlight something. You have that available. Oftentimes software will also offer you stamps, electronic stamps that you can customize. And one of them could be a signature stamp that you've used. I would lock it down with security so only the person responsible uses it, but you can do that as well. If you need to share information, I bet you can pick out where you would send an email. Look at the envelope, right? and it comes up as an attachment, as this fake invoice does for this company, or send it to a printer or whatever you need to do. Now, the other advantage with the software is you can search any number of ways. I can do full text searching. What that means is any machine created document, I can have it search through all the pages looking for a word, a phrase, a wildcard. I know it starts with FLY, put an asterisk and tell me everything you find. Right down to date range searches and as narrow and as finite as you want to be. You do have a lot of flexibility there as well. Mobile devices, as I mentioned, have really, really taken over when it comes to working remotely. Forms especially. Let me give you another example. Working with a softener company, water softener. They had people in the field who were having to manually write down on paper, I put this much salt in, when I did the install, I used this much in materials, I had this much labor, and on and on and on it goes from there. And then getting that paper back to the office was a problem, obviously, and then getting it into the system. So what they did was they created a form that could be viewed on a mobile device. So all that technician had to do while in the field was bring up that form, click drop downs, put in numbers, information, and when he hit submit, or she, it automatically sent it back to the office and kicked off a workflow. Started the work in process so an invoice could be created and maybe inventory resupplied, whatever needed to happen at that point. You can do negotiations, review contracts, approve them, access information, whatever you have the rights to. And one of the areas I've been seeing a lot of action with is in relationship to invoices. Having them come in, maybe you need somebody on your team who's working remotely to approve it. You send it to them, they can look it up on their phone, they can approve, reject. If they reject, you might want to ask them why, and that can be required. And they hit submit and send it back in, and it's kicked into the workflow, and it's moving forward to get things paid on time. Electronic is the name of the game when it comes to working at home. And another fun area has been anybody in the field with expense accounts. Take your phone, take a picture of the receipt from lunch out, the hotel, whatever it is. You can clean it up, edit it, do a lot of things with it, and then upload it into the software. It sends it automatically to your manager who approves it or rejects it, gives you a comment or two, and sends it on to be approved from there. So mobile devices have a lot of use in our new world that we're dealing with. So let's talk about how you optimize things here. How do you capture business information that's out there? There's a number of ways you can do that, and let's talk about that. You've heard me talk about the phone, but if you've got documents or information out there that is routinely the same on top, maybe it's a purchase order or a check copy on top of a packet of invoices that you've paid, you can set up templates to point out zones on there where that information always will be, or sometimes there is software out there smart enough to look for a keyword. If I see the word purchase order, I know there's a number I need to pull after it, so I'll look for that keyword. And then it will automatically fill in the field so you can find it later and import it and store it in the software. It stops that manual data entry and the human error that goes with it. For those odds and ends of things out there, we've got what's called machine learning technology. Let me give you an example. I work with an organization, they're a mom and pop place that fixes RVs down to cars. One woman is handling all of the accounts payable, and how she's doing it is with this machine learning technology. The invoices come in for oil and tires and parts and uniforms. She walks over to the copier. She puts them in the feeder, hits scan, it drops them into a document tray that's being watched by this intelligent indexing. It then looks at it and goes, oh, you're an invoice for UPS. Goes to the cloud, and it says, I've seen this invoice before in other places. I'm going to pull the information that you need to store this and index it, and I'll send it back down to you already completed, ready to go. All the fields are filled out. It doesn't keep any of the information within that invoice. It just looks at the structure of it. How you know it fared out there and how well it read it, there'll be a little colored box in the top left corner. If it's green, it pulled everything you needed. If it's yellow, it's saying, I got some, I need some help. Take your mouse and run that cursor over the top of the areas that I'm questioning. Show me where it's at. Next time I'll learn and I'll have it. And then if it's a red box, it would be something new. It's never seen it before, so you need to use your mouse again to show, but by the second and third time, it will have learned it. She was using this to do a one-woman job in accounts payable, and we were running things through like dot matrix uniform invoices that it was reading beautifully. The other hot word out there you're going to hear a lot about is called RPA. It's called robotic process automation. Now let me explain what that is. They're software robots, but they're not robots like you and I think of them. They are not humanoids. They're not taking over the world. They're not replacing people even. They mimic a human worker. Do you have any jobs in your organization that are repetitive, manual? I mean, those projects that require more work from your hands than your brains, that just numb your mind completely. That's where RPA comes in and takes over. I'll give you an example. An organization I was working with has a report that has to be run 365 days a year. They have somebody come into the office, run the report. It takes about 20 minutes each day of the year. They then have to upload that report to another software and sit and wait while that happens. This is on every holiday, 365 days a year, and they have to pay them all the extra bonus time, obviously, for coming in on those days. That's where RPA, or robotic process automation, comes in to take over those jobs. You can't think like a human. Those jobs have to still stay with humans, but those things that have rule-based things attached to them that make it easy, and I'm sure you can think of those things, that makes working at home that much easier. It eliminates the manual and helps your people be more productive in what they're doing. So it's been around for a long time. It's just really 2016 forward, and now all the major companies out there have some form of this. You're going to hear a lot more about it as we move forward. Email. You heard me say earlier, the studies have proven most of you are storing everything in your email somewhere, either in the email or in folders in the Outlook or whatever system you happen to be using, and there it stays, not accessible to anybody else. I worked with a woman. She had 10 to 12,000 unopened emails in her inbox. She used to insist to me, she was in management, she used to insist that IT had her on a different email service. She didn't have one like the rest of us. Finally, I had said something to IT and I said, is this person really on a different service? He said, no, look at her inbox. There were 10 to 12,000 unopened emails. Her thought process was, I don't want to open them. They might have a virus, but I don't want to delete them because they might be important. So she kept them. And I can tell you, she could never find what she wanted at any time. I more often got a call going, can you send me this email? I can't find it. And she's still doing it to this day, because I just talked to her the other day and I said, did you not see the 3 emails I sent? She said, no, I don't think I got them. And pretty soon I heard her say, oh, wait a minute. Let me search under this. No, let me look under this. Oh, I think I've got it. You need to help those people with their problem. And you need to get a solution in place where they can organize and store their emails centrally. So if you're looking at a contract and you need to know what email communication has happened, when you do a search on that contract, the emails come back with it. So you can see they're there and they're not locked away somewhere in somebody's workstation that you don't have access to, or worse yet, you're that person with 10 to 12,000 and you can't find what you need. The other thing is electronic signatures are big now. This is one of those areas that has always been out there for quite some time, but has really taken the front, I guess you could say, or taken the forefront in this remote workers world. And let me tell you a little more about that as you go. Now, there are a lot of companies out there. I'm not endorsing anyone. There's just a couple listed here. I don't work with them or anything, or sell for them or whatever. But you need to know this. They're legally binding and meet current security requirements for these type of signatures. And I work with certain companies that demand this. They will only get paperwork from us that they can sign digitally with one of the services that are out there. Security is very tight on these, can be even advanced if you want it to be, you know, where you say, okay, I'm going to have you sign this, but first I want you to type in the code that's been emailed to you under your email address, or whatever way you want to go about that. That they are meeting a lot of legal requirements, and it's very, very much in use. On the last panel I was just on an hour ago, state of Michigan people were on there, and it's recognized by government agencies in the state of Michigan as well as acceptable. So it's coming across the board with digital signatures that are out there. Explore them. They're not that expensive. They usually, it depends on the software solution. They can be concurrent, meaning just whoever grabs it first gets to use it, or they can be assigned licenses to certain users in the organization. That's what we have in our organization. You heard me tell the story about the coworker in the email. This is how we fix her problem. So when she's in her Outlook or whatever email service you happen to be using, she goes up to the store button and hits the drop down, and she can choose what electronic database the software is stored in when she goes to store it. Now, and she can also choose things like, do I want to leave a copy in my inbox and just put a copy in the software? Am I only looking at attachments, or do I want to move it out entirely? And she can decide where it goes. If she's in human resources or HR, as we sometimes refer that to, human resources, she may choose that employee one that you see there. Maybe she's working in accounting and needs to store and index an invoice right automatically. She hits the bottom choice. What happens when she does, it pops up with all of the index fields there. Now, if an email has arrived from this person before, it'll pull all the information. Company name, to, from, subject, that sort of thing. If not, we've got machine learning coming in again. It'll pull what it can, like subject and date. You need to put in maybe the contact name and the company, and the next time an email arrives, it'll know that you've had information from this person before and automatically fill those out for you. So email storage is very, very easy from within an email program, but the key is to get a software solution out there that allows you to do as quick as a click of a button and it's out and gone. Let's talk about collaboration. You've heard me talk about how important it is to have a software out there to help you make the decisions and be more productive. Where I really see this shining, and you heard me say I've done this 23 years, in the last 8 or 10 years, it's gone from store and retrieve software to workflow and forms. Those are the big ones that are moving out there today, because workflow can be set up so you have to-do list electronically showing you what you have that needs to be taken care of along the way. If you don't or aren't in the web client to work with that, maybe you're in the field, you can receive an email with a link in the email saying, hey, Joe, this invoice needs to be approved. Click this link to approve or reject this, and it sends it back into the workflow. The other advantage is you can put timelines on them and say, you know what, if Joe doesn't look at that invoice in 2 days, I want you to notify me so I can prod him into taking a look at it. Or if Joe's on vacation, send it to his manager. You can put all kinds of rules in place that make it work for you and work very, very well along the way. And at any time, management can see what's going on out there. There's dashboards, there's reports that you can run sharing what's happened and what's going on, so they have a pulse on what's going what's moving in the organization. And forms, you've already heard me talk about how critical those are. Think about forms that you've got in your office that are paper now. Can you make them electronic and share them via email or a link on your website to be more efficient, to have them work for you? Now let's take a look at task and workflow. Remember I said there was a to-do list? Here's Peggy's from our imaginary Peters Engineering, and if you look at that, she's got a FOIA request to take care of. She works in contracts. There's 4 there that are active. And when she opens that up, the list appears of what she needs to do, and that's over on the right-hand side that you see there. And she can decide what to do with that. By the click of a button, she can approve it, reject it, and provide a reason, maybe add a cost center to it, a general ledger code. There is so much you can do. And when she hits confirm, it is now moving in the workflow and heading off towards being paid. You have a lot of flexibility. You heard me mention forms was the other area that's huge. And where I really see this shining the most is in human resources. Those HR people are using it for onboarding people, but anywhere it can work where there's a form. In this case, somebody's been hired at Peters Engineering. They're sent this enrollment form and they're told to fill it out. Now, part of that is you can have things that are mandatory. If this person doesn't fill in social security number, it will not let them submit the form. It can be dynamic. What I mean is if they check single under marital status, nothing happens. But if they check married, boom, a box pops up and says, what's your spouse's name? So you do have a lot of flexibility with that, but here's the other fun thing it can do. That one source of information in that electronic form can complete other forms. That information collected can now automatically complete the W-4 for this person, an emergency contact form, an I-9. The resume is already stored out there in that database, so when I do a search as an HR or human resources person, I now have everything at my fingertips. It's stored out there automatically. By the way, on forms, you can put a tab. They can attach things like a copy of a driver's license, a contract. There's a lot of flexibility when you're building the forms. You need to be aware of that out there. Let me share with you some free online collaboration tools. And the key word here is free. This is one, you're going to be talking about mobile phones and how they're working. PaperScan is a free app out there. You can get it at the App Store. It's for the iPhone. You can do multiple page scans. You can edit the documents, crop them, upload them into workflow. This is not connected to any software, so it works with anything that you need to send information up to. And you can also send things to AirDrop, print from this app, scan and print. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do. So I put that in there so you have the website, but just look for Paper Scan app when you go out to the App Store. The other one, and this one I use at home, I use it in the office, I live by this one. It's called Foxit PDF Printer. Have you ever created a Word document or an Excel and wanted to turn it into a PDF? You can do it as easily as clicking your print button, and instead of choosing your copier or some printer nearby, you choose Foxit Reader PDF Printer, and it comes up, you give it a name, and you store it. Now you have a PDF of that document. And here's the other fun thing. I use it to fill in forms. If I got a form from somebody, it's not a PDF fillable form, or it's not electronic like in the software we talked about, I can use the typewriter is what they call it, or the free text form in here to fill out forms, add notations. In fact, where you see ARMA Foxit Reader text sample, I added that on. You can change the fonts, you can change the size. This is free, and I'm going to back up a little bit and let you take a look at that again. Go look at Foxit software. Don't go for the paid for version. Go for the free one. That one's important. And I tell you what, it's been a lifesaver as I do it. The other thing, I know you mentioned in my intro, I teach a lot of webinars, and my marketing staff says, hey, Mary, record the webinar and we want to post it on our website for people. How I get that large file over after I've converted it to an MP4 is I use this free software called WeTransfer. You can see on the left-hand side, I can add a folder, I can add just a file, I can decide to send it to numbers of people, put a message with it. When I hit transfer, it sends me a code on my phone that I have to key in to validate it, and then it sends it off and it tells me it's been picked up and even notifies me if they haven't looked at it in a set amount of time. This is wonderful for sending large documents, files that are too big for email and other things. It's free, WeTransfer. Backfile conversion, I know you're thinking, what has that got to do with a remote worker, right? Well, here's where this has gotten interesting lately, and that people are now attacking their backfile. I've been working with a client with 200 boxes they're paying for in storage at one of the storage organizations out there, and they said to me, you know, we've got employees that we're paying. They're working at home. The receptionist, for example, is only doing 5 hours of work a week, and we might as well use them for something. So they have bought scanners that they're going to deploy either at their home or bring her in one day a week, or he, to sit at the front desk to kind of monitor things and scan that backfile information and get rid of it. If you're looking at a backfile, you could do a complete conversion. That means everything you got stored there as well as active things, maybe in the office. My suggestion would be to start with day forward, work into the most current things and then go back to 2019, 2018. Chances are those are the ones you're going to need more often than you will something in 1910. If you start with 1910 to go forward, you'll never catch that rabbit as you start to work on that conversion. Day forward, you don't worry about that. Backfile, the retention's going to go take care of it all, and you just do day forward. Or scan on demand is the third method. Doctor's office. You haven't been there for 10 years, you show up, they pull your paper file out of the back storeroom somewhere. Now they scan it into the system. That's scan on demand. So let's do a review. We're coming towards the end here for this remote worker strategy. Here are some stats that you might find interesting. This was published in July, so I'm sure these are even a little bit different now by Keypoint Intelligence. But the challenges that we've talked about today that people are facing working from home, collaboration, Teams is big out there. We use Teams at our organization. There's so much you can do with that, from chatting to activities to quickly calling somebody without having to know their phone number. Take a look at that. SharePoint's out there. There's a lot in that Microsoft Office suite. The other challenge is access to work files and materials. How do you deal with things if they're not electronic and accessible to everybody that needs that the access to that information? How do you support customers and colleagues in security? This is interesting. There was a 72% shift in digital processes when COVID hit. This is the other number that I find interesting. They're saying 80% will continue to work either that hybrid, partially at home, partially in the office after the pandemic ends. Our world has changed, and I don't think you're going to be seeing things the same as we move forward. Here's the other interesting thing. 90% have increased or maintained their amount of scanning. Now, how are you doing your scanning at home? That's a problem. So I'm also seeing a lot of organizations deploy scanners out to their workers in the field so they have that ability. And 56% have started scanning documents using their mobile phone. 95%, it's increased. Are you surprised? No. Phones are a great way to scan and bring something in or send something out to somebody. And 85% have started going to some kind of cloud-based file storage and sharing out there. So the numbers have proven it based on the surveys that are going on out there. So the future of work, we know what it's going to look like. Productivity is steady. They've done tests and surveys on this by Nitro Analytics. There's less stress. There's greater job satisfaction for working from home. And that work from home model has now become an expectation in our world. The challenges that are still out there are the document processes. Those are pains. And the solutions that make that remote work easy. And now digital transformation has become really urgent. It's become more necessary as we continue on in the same mode of remote working. So I'm going to run through these real quick because I know we're coming to the end. The benefits we've already talked about, how secure you can make your electronic information and access it from anywhere in the world, what forms can do to make your world so much easier and faster as you submit things electronically that way, what you can do to track information, have it move through your organization and workflow electronically, including signatures, how you take care of business when the staff is off sick or not there, how do they cover things, and the bottom line is, how do you future-proof your organization? Here's a game plan for you as we take a look at employee productivity has to be considered. You know, technology and hardware, look at all of those as you look at how you're going to change this world that you're working in now and make it better. How do you enable those employees, give them the tools they need to be successful? How do you keep them happy that they're working at home and connected with the rest of the sales force? You know, those meetings we talked about on Monday morning where the team gets together to talk. What do you do? Here's the game plan. As we move forward, evaluate your current situation. Develop a plan of action, prioritize things. Take a look, an inventory of what tools you've currently got available to work with. What's a quick win? What can you do really quickly that you can get it up and get it moving? What maybe needs to be phased in? Maybe phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Take a look at security. What's out there in those laptops and things that the company didn't issue that you need to be concerned about? And again, that might be something you move on quickly again, or a phased approach. And how do you optimize your business processes? What do you do to improve things and reduce risk at the same time? With collaboration, we're back to evaluate how you're communicating with your folks out there, how they're collaborating. Are you using Teams to the fullest extent? Better yet, are you mandating that they use it? Because the biggest problem you've got is half the team is on it and the other half is not using it. And now you've got communication running in emails and Teams and other places, and it gets crazy and frustrating. I can tell you from experience on that one. So take a look at that for quick wins and a phased approach. And finally, talk to your knowledge workers. Get an idea of what's going on out there, what their feelings are about workflow and the shortcomings that are in the process, what you can do to help them as they do their remote work. And that's the end of my presentation, and I thank you all for listening. Hopefully you pulled something valuable from this. So, question? I saw several things flying through as we were doing this. How are we doing out there? Questions?
Well, I'll start. This is Janice.
Hey, Janice.
You know, what a presentation. It would have been great to have this before the pandemic and the event had to go home. But that's like it. It's always after.
What we've learned, if not for this pandemic, think of it that way.
Right.
What we've learned in the last 8 months on how to do business at home.
Right. And, you know, it's, you know, this is, you know, the information you presented and, you know, about, you know, the productivity that the workers are having. And I know I work for Nationwide Insurance here in Columbia, and the consensus is the associates are working harder from home. Okay. including me, and you know, some of us are feeling it, whether it's burnout, work burnout, stress, or whatever. And I'm not just talking about myself, but people I've talked to who are working from home, you know,
Yeah.
depression and all of that. And that could be because we're not managing our time well.
Bingo.
Work from home. And I know I'm guilty. I don't take lunch. And when I do, I'm running errands. But if I don't have errands to run, I eat my breakfast and then I'm working. And I don't even eat, I do breakfast and dinner. So I may need to relook at that. But then you went into, are we eating too much or too little? Are we gaining weight? So it's so much a lot of information to take to really digest. But you talked about time management. Are we working too much? The distractions. And then you got into information management. You know, how are we managing that? There's the technology and security portion of or parts of information. So I kind of, when I was taking notes, it's like, what type of information governance can't talk, are we practicing from home? And a lot of us have not been, I don't know, trained is the right word, but because we had to go home earlier this year and we just went at it. But that information component of, you know, how are we doing with our information? How secure is it? The cloud storage that was a good part of your presentation. With our company, we are utilizing cloud storage, so that might be a thumbs up for us. But still, there's that. What is the information governance with the work from home environment? But I see where, you know, at the end of your presentation, you said, or you didn't say, but the surveys said, or most companies said, that even once we're on the other side of the pandemic, 80% of associates will be working from home.
Yes.
However that's rolled out. And that's, you know, it's like, I wonder how long that will be maintained, because throughout the years things change. When I see that 80% working from home, the first thing I think about is culture. How will that affect the company's culture? You know, there's already a breakdown in the culture. So how will that culture be harnessed with, you know, 80% still working from home? And I'm sure if this, you know, happens and maybe continues, maybe companies will relook at it and maybe the 80% will decrease. But to your point, if hopefully we get on the other side of this pandemic in 2021, a great deal of us will still be working from home. So,
yeah. I've heard organizations that have said they first told their employees December, now they're saying June, and some have said all of 2021, they've already told them they'll be working from home. I'm hearing that.
Wow.
And these are groups like Ford and some of the automakers up here. Yeah, it's interesting.
So that's all. I just was recapping your presentation, but other than that, I don't have any questions.
Everybody else,
And I don't know.
of something, at the end of the presentation, my phone number, my email are there, give me a buzz and so forth. I know it was a lot of information that I put in there as we were talking, but there's a lot going on with building that remote strategy, from personal all the way to business along the way.
Right.
Yes, because we have to take care of ourselves, folks. You're not
Very good point.
Yeah, we have to take care of us first. And I know I was doing what you're doing, Janice, eating my lunch at my desk, not taking breaks. I was exhausted at the end of the day. And I felt like I was working harder at home than I did at work as a result. And you can't do that.
Yes, you're right. The COVID has not stopped the way our bodies function.
No,
So.
no. And I find I do better working, more productive if I take a step out. When it was nice, I'd be on the deck and having lunch, for example. I'd get out of the house. My niece would go out and walk around the block just to get away from it all and get some exercise. So do whatever you need to do to avoid burnout, folks. That's important.
So we, ARMA Columbus chapter, we truly appreciate you taking the time and, you know, sharing this information with ARMA and ARMA members in Columbus and wherever else they're logging in from. And hopefully maybe as things change, we can reach out to you again for additional presentations for our monthly meetings. So thank you so much, Mary.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It was good talking to all of you. Stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay,
Have
thank
a great day. The weekend's coming.
you. Right. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. You're welcome.
And,
Bye.
and that does conclude our meetings. I do, Joy, were there any announcements you wanted to make for those who are still on the still in the virtual conference, or Mark?
Just keep your eye out on the ARMA Columbus website. We will be hopefully announcing December shortly, and should have all of January through April scheduled and out there by the end of December at the very latest. So keep your eyes open. We're going to do a lot more of these with people from around the country.
Okay, so thank you again, everyone, for remoting in, and we will see you at our next meeting. And of course, the communications and announcements will go out as they have been. Everyone enjoy the rest of their day. And we'll just, wait for everyone to or start our board meeting.
Mark, I'll